Where do I get some of these gorgeous fabric scraps? That's the question that a lot of you have asked quite recently, and I'm really glad that you did, because for a while there I thought that maybe I'm the only crazy one that actually sources fabric scraps. In all seriousness, there's actually quite a bit to this topic. I have about 15 different places where you can source fabric scraps. So we're going to divide this and make this into a 3-part mini-series. In today's episode, I'm going to share with you the first 5 places where I get my fabric scraps, and those are the places that you're already familiar with from the Made from Scraps sewing series on my channel. We will talk about how I calculate the price and how I determine whether it's a good one or not, because you would think that fabric scraps would be much cheaper than actual whole yardage, but it's not always the case. We're also going to talk about what you can actually use these for with the real life examples. And as always, there is 2 sides to the coin. On one side, you can get a really great boost to your creativity, and on the other side, you can really end up with a huge mess. So we're going to talk about what to be aware of. These are in no particular order, so we're going to start with Thunderpants. Now, Thunderpants is a clothing brand that is based right here in the United States that primarily focuses on making undergarments, and they do that by using just one type of fabric, which is a cotton knit that consists from 90% cotton and 10% spandex. That's how I found them, and that's why I chose them for one of my fabric scrap sources. What you see on your screens is one of the scrap boxes that I got from Thunderpants. And here, make yourself a really important note that there's a really big difference when you order fabric scraps from an actual fabric retailer like an online store and when you order fabric scraps from a clothing brand. Fabric scraps that come from a clothing brand will be offcuts from their production, so whatever is left after cutting the patterns that they need. And those are often very irregular, very oddly shaped pieces, some a little bit bigger, some a little bit smaller, some even stacked like this in multiple layers, because that's how they were cutting their fabric. As I mentioned earlier, they're all of the same type. This is cotton spandex knit. So that way I don't have to question. I know exactly what I'm getting and I know exactly how to work with this fabric. And cotton spandex or cotton lycra mix in knits is something that I use quite often for sewing for myself and for my daughter. So this was a perfect pick. I also love that because these are offcuts from a production of an actual clothing brand, most of the colors go really well together, not only solids with solids, but also solids with prints. This in part allows you to make more cohesive fabric scrap projects, like for example this little orange patchwork jacket. It's entirely made from fabric scraps from Thunderpants, for the exception of the lining and the inside of the pockets. This project is part of the Made from Scrap series on my channel, so if you'd like to see the entire process, how it came about, what you need to know, and the techniques, then you will find the link in the description of this video. There you will also be able to find all of the other resources that I'm mentioning today. Let's talk about the price. Thunderpants gives you an option to order these in 1 pound, 3 pound, or 5 pound quantities. But let's say you want 8 pounds, you can of course mix and match and you can order 5 pounds plus 3 pounds. And if you order 1 versus 5 pounds, in a 5 pound box, you actually get a better price per pound versus ordering just 1 pound of fabric scraps. But you also have to factor in the shipping. I have ordered from Thunderpants twice. The first time I ordered a 5 pound box, and then I really enjoyed working with the fabric scraps, and therefore I ordered a 10 pound box. The shipping for a 10 pound box was just about $5, which is a great price. The box that you see on your screens was either 5 pound or a 10 pound box, and I don't remember exactly because I wasn't necessarily anticipating that I'm going to be filming a really detailed video about fabric scraps, so forgive me for that. I don't remember exactly, but at least it gives you an idea of how it looks if you choose to get some. Overall, the cost per pound for me, because remember, I ordered 5-pound boxes, therefore the price per pound is cheaper versus ordering 1 pound, plus the price of shipping will be different depending on the state and also depending on the country, and not only that, but also depending when you purchase them, because the price of shipping always goes up and up and up. So keep all those factors in mind. So in my case, the price per pound is just about $3, which is probably one of the best values for fabric scraps that I have found. So far, these have served me well and exactly as I intended. I used them for necklines, I used them for cuffs on the sleeves and on the bottoms. I used them for bands for undies. The main fabric for the undies is not from Thunderpants, but the bands are. I've made many socks, scrunchies, accessories, and I like using these colors for a little details and little accents because I really hate buying a full yard or half a yard of fabric when I only need just the tiniest bit. And I know people will say, well, Alisa, go to the fabric store and only buy what you need. Yes, but I only have one fabric store in about 30-minute driving radius, and it doesn't really have fabric that I like. But when you order online, most of the times you can only order a yard. In some stores you can order half a yard, but not less than that. So in this case, fabric scraps, personally for me, is a great solution. Next on my list are fabric scraps from Dharma, and I truly love Dharma Trading Company. By the way, none of this is sponsored. If it was, I would let you know. But I've been a customer of Dharma's for about, I would say, going on about 10 years. And primarily what I buy from them are different types of fabric dyes, and that's what they specialize in. But because of that, they also carry quite a wide selection of fabrics that are suitable to be transformed with fabric inks and fabric dyes and a lot of other different things. That's where the fabric scraps come in. Now remember how a little bit earlier when we were talking about Thunderpants, I mentioned that there is a really big difference when you order fabric scraps from a clothing brand or when you order fabric scraps from a retailer. Well, Dharma is a retailer. So right now on your screens you can see a 2-pound bag. It was a mixed bag of natural fibers, and as you can see, all of the pieces are quite even. Some are smaller, some are bigger, some are very small, but most of them are of the rectangular shape. That's because all of these fabric scraps are the end of bolt, off cuts, little pieces with slight damages on them, but they came from a roll of fabric. The selection of their fabric scraps is greatly based on availability, so whatever is left over from cutting the orders, and it does vary. So I ordered these about a year ago or so, and back then selection included a bag of mostly colored silks. You could also get a bag of mostly white silks, which could have anything from really thin China silk to a really nice stiff organza, which is great for so many projects. Then you could get a bag of mostly cottons and a bag of fabrics that come with natural fiber content. As you can see right now, the selection has changed, and also there is a limit per order. Now, calculating the overall value and price of these fabric scraps can get a little tricky when it comes to Dharma, because for me, my main order isn't for the fabric scraps. My main order that I place usually is for fabric dyes and any other additional tools. And then I have added fabric scraps to it. And I've never seen any other shipping option with Dharma except for FedEx, which can get a little pricey, but also fabric dyes do take extra space, and some of the stuff that I order is quite heavy. So that's probably one of the reasons why. Right now, as of the moment of recording of this video, silks go for $15 per pound, which silks are usually more expensive than a lot of other fibers anyway. And then cotton goes for $13 per 2 pounds, which comes to $6.50 per pound, but that's without shipping. What I personally got in these fabric scrap bags are mostly fabrics either just plain white or of this sort of like natural unbleached color, for the exception of the bag that had colored silks. But then once again, the selection has changed from the time that I have ordered my fabric scraps. But regardless of the color, these are actually great, at least for me, in a variety of different applications. When I need to do swatches for fabric dyes, I love to use these fabric scraps. When I need to do some sort of prototyping or testing out a new technique or something that I have envisioned, or a mock-up for a complex garment, then these are really great for that as well. Then larger pieces I also use for clothing. So here is one of the garments that was made from scraps, and the bottom part, the white part, came from one of the fabric scraps from Dharma. This project is also part of the Made from Scrap series on my channel, so there is a full video of the process. If you get organza in one of these bags, it is absolutely great to use instead of iron-on interfacing, so definitely give that a try. And some of the larger pieces we also love to use in order to experiment with different dye techniques. My daughter and I, we absolutely love doing that. So here's one of the examples. It was a piece of a cotton canvas from one of the bags from the Dharma, and then we just dripped dye on it and created a fun and colorful pattern, which I then, part of it, turned into a little bag for a little girl. With all of that being said, here's a word of caution. I had these fabric scraps for about a year now. I also had the fabric scraps from Thunderpants for about a year, and as you can see, I'm still working through them. And that's because fabric scraps do take more energy and more time to utilize in your projects. It definitely is a super great way how to sort of expand on your creativity and try out new things and just be a little bit more adventurous. But on the flip side, you also have to know yourself and what kind of creative person are you. Maybe you like to be very, very selective about the things that you like, or maybe you are more open to different color options and whatnot. Because I know from my own personal experience, although I've been working with fabric scraps for a very long time now, I still get sometimes overwhelmed by the amount that I have. But I also know that with fabric scraps, the amount is what usually creates the variety, and variety is what I need for my creative work. So it's always this sort of like the push and pull, and you really have to know yourself. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, sometimes it's a really great boost of creativity, but sometimes you can really create a mess and just boxes and boxes of stuff that are just sort of cluttering your creative vision, and that can get pretty overwhelming. Next, let's take a look at where do I source my linen fabric scraps from. And these are so much fun. And an interesting fact is that from what I found out is that the company is Lithuanian based, which is my side of the world. The shipping to United States, however, was very reasonable. So whether you are my United States or Canadian sewing friend, or you're my European sewing friend, I think this could be useful for everybody. These are also offcuts from a production, so I'm not sure if we can call that company a fashion brand because they do clothes and then they also do some home accessories and whatnot. But besides that, with the understanding that this is a production brand, also comes a realization that the shapes and sizes of these fabric scraps can be quite interesting. What you see on your screens are 2 bags of fabric scraps in one package. Each bag weighs about 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds. The video clip that you see was taken right as the fabric scraps, the package, arrived. And as you can see, the edges of the scraps are all nice and neat. But I had these for about a year now, and the edges right now are all weathered. That's because they did go through a wash, just like any other fabric that I use for a regular sewing project. Washing fabric scraps, however, does come with a caveat or two, but for me, it is an absolutely necessary step, unless of course that goes against the directions of the actual fabric that I'm working with, for example, leather or any other of that type. I will show you how I process and how I wash fabric scraps depending on what type of fabric they are, but we're going to do that in the next episode of this mini-series. Otherwise, there's just going to be a lot of information. But if so far you are enjoying this video, then make sure that you subscribe and click on the notifications, because I have found that you can't really trust YouTube to show you the videos that you really want to see. You got to proactively sort of subscribe and make sure that you're on it. Selection and price-wise, they have two options on their website. You can either get a scrap bag or you can get a selection of 5 remnants. So I got 2 of the scrap bags. I can see that they're currently running some sort of promotion as of the time of the recording of this video, which is buy one, get one 50% off. But when I bought my fabric scraps together with the shipping, 1 pound came to be about $13 to $14. Nowadays, linen can get quite pricey. We're talking $14 per yard and up. That's usually without seeking any major promotion, clearances, or discounts. So I would say for a linen fabric scrap bag, this is an average good price. Not necessarily the best. Maybe I would like it to be a couple of dollars cheaper, but I would say it's a good one. I also love the fact that linen in and of itself, especially plain weave linen, is a very universal fabric. You can use it from making kitchen towels to making clothes to decor, craft items, and everything in between, which is exactly what I've done with these fabric scraps. Some of it became these cute little bunnies for Easter decor. Some of these became Christmas ornaments for a tree. Then, of course, a couple of garments as well. I really love this black dress that I made for Project Dress a Girl. Once again, this project is part of the Made from Scrap series, and there is a full video on how this came together, which was quite an interesting process. And then I also made myself this little blouse. The color scheme that I got is definitely more on the rustic side, which is not necessarily what I would pick in a regular linen, but it's actually great because although I do have fabric dyes and I can dye my own linen, I actually prefer bright colors, and so does my daughter. So I don't really have this sort of like deep burgundy or this sort of grassy green in my dye collection. So this works out really great for all of the little projects and not so little projects that I make from linen. Now, I know I've said this before, but I do want to give you another quick reminder that a lot of these fabric scraps I bought about a year ago, so the prices might have changed and the shipping price might have changed as well. So please make sure that you also do your own calculation based on the prices and the shipping that you get. Next, let's talk about Thief and Bandit, where I got some of the most whimsical and magical fabric scraps, but also some of the priciest ones. Now, Thief and Bandit is a Canada-based slow fashion brand, so whatever the fabric scraps that I got are the offcuts from their production. These are very, very unique, and that's the reason why I was sort of ready to pay the price, because these are screen printed by hand. So all of the designs are applied through a screen print on the fabric, and it's a very long process because some of these have layered designs on them, but as you can see, as a result, it really develops a beautiful print that I haven't seen before. There is a little caveat to this. Depending on how thick is your screen printing ink and what kind of ink you're using for it, sometimes it can sort of arrest the knit properties of your knit fabric, so it doesn't stretch as well as it would without the applied design on it. When I made this cat t-shirt where the top part was the fabric from Thief and Bandit, I did go over some of these issues and how I went about resolving them. So I definitely suggest to take a look at that episode of Made from Scraps. Selection-wise on their website, you can get woven or you can get knit scraps, but woven fabric scraps have been out of stock for the longest time. I've never seen them actually being in stock, so I've never was able to order some. But knit fabric scraps are in stock and you can definitely purchase them. The scrap bundles are sold by 1 pound, and when I got mine, together with the shipping, I ordered 2 bundles and I paid about $27, $28 per pound of these fabric scraps, which is definitely on the pricey side. But now that I'm looking at their current price, it has gone up. So that's what I mean, that you have to always check what is the current price, what is the price of the shipping, and how it calculates to whatever is your budget. I don't have the video of how the package arrived, but what you see here is approximately 2 bundles, and I have used up these fabric scraps to make various projects. You can see a t-shirt over here, and of course that cat t-shirt that I mentioned to you before. On the bright side, some of the fabric scraps are quite large and are enough to sort of Frankenstein a full garment out of them. Some of them are quite small, but what was a little bit on the disappointing part, particularly for me, is that all of them have black background. That might not be the case for you, I don't know. But for me, I don't really wear that much black, so that was kind of like on the, I have to problem solve this part. But other than that, these are really, really gorgeous. All right, the last place of fabric scrap sourcing on my list today is Fab Scrap, and Fab Scrap is quite different from the rest. Fab Scrap is basically a fabric recycling center that is made to tackle the fabric waste and fabric offcuts from the local design houses in New York. So the fabric scraps that we order from them could have been samples from the production, they could have been part of the garments, they could have been little swatches, they could have been offcuts from some of the garment production stages as well, and pretty much everything in between. I also ordered these about a year ago, and back then, together with shipping, I paid about $8 to $9 per pound. But as you currently see on the website, the prices have gone up. And you can also see that you can choose from a wide variety of fabric scraps. Some of them are sorted out by color, so you can choose a color scheme, and some of them are sorted out sort of by a very broad type of fabric like faux fur or sequins. However, there's something really important that you need to know when ordering fabric scraps from Fab Scrap. So most of the fabric scraps that we have just discussed were of a particular type. So you would order a bag and it would be a bag of linen fabric scraps or cotton fabric scraps and whatnot. And that is by design, because I am on the pickier side about what fabrics I use for my projects, and I mostly like working with natural fibers. I do like working with blends as well, like for example cotton spandex mix, but most of the times I would like to stick to natural fibers. So that's the reason why I seek out fabric scraps of one particular type of fabric. When it comes to these, you don't know exactly what you're getting, none of them are labeled, and you have to make sure that you can somehow incorporate them in your project. It can be any type of fabric. Most of these I can identify, but I must tell you that nowadays they do polyester so well that sometimes it feels very, very close to cotton or very, very close to viscose, and it can really fool you. So for a lot of these, I end up doing a burn test. We're going to discuss that in the next episode of this mini-series as well. On the bright side, there are some really gorgeous fabric scraps and even knit samples and whatnot that wouldn't be really available in a regular fabric store because these come from fashion and design houses in New York. Currently, I love using these fabric scraps for little embellishments, and I do love using them for some gorgeous Barbie clothes. I know this definitely isn't a, garment sewing, but it does remind me of a very, very early beginnings of my passion for sewing, and I love to share that side of sewing with my daughter. Another caveat to these, because they are all very different types of fabrics, is that of course washing them and processing them is, quite of a hassle. But once again, about that in the next episode of the series. So definitely subscribe, and if you want to see the entire season of Made from Scraps, then click right over here. So many fun, interesting, unique, and special projects in there, and I truly hope that you're going to get some inspiration. Until next time, happy, thoughtful sewing. Bye!